G'day, Professor Joseph Drew. In this video, I will tell you what heresthetic is. It's the most powerful weapon in politics. It can also be very powerful in social situations. So hang on, I'll give you all the details you need and an example of how it works. So, heresthetic is a neologism. It's a word that's been made up. And it was made up by the great William H. Riker, one of the most prominent political scientists of the modern age. He worked mostly in America. Heresthetic is all about the art of political manipulation. It's all about changing and manipulating the feasible choices that people can choose from, with the intent of appealing to latent preferences, to things that they already want that they may not know they want or may not wish to say they want. So a really good example of this, remember the John Howard federal election campaign that suddenly became all about illegal immigrants? That was a heresthetic move. It targeted our latent prejudices against illegal immigrants, and people responded accordingly by voting for him when previously it looked like he could have lost that particular election. Okay, so there's three main heresthetic devices, and the last one that I discussed, dimension control, is actually by far the most powerful device. Now, heresthetic is all about choice. That's what the root word means, choice in Greek. Now, it's often lost on people describing heresthetic that each one of these devices affects a different type of choice or a different aspect of choice. So agenda control. This is when you decide which options people are going to get to vote on, like was done in the Republican debates. This is the choices on offer. You're deliberately affecting those choices. And if you don't provide people with certain voting choices, well, then they can't possibly vote for those things, can they? So that's a very clever way of manipulating people into choosing what you want them to choose, or more to the point, not choosing what you don't want them to choose. Strategic voting. This is about how people exercise their choice. Even if you don't have the choices you want on offer on the voting ballot, you can still make and exercise other choices. For instance, you can abstain from voting. Politicians often do that when they don't agree with their party policy, or sometimes do that. Or you can cast a donkey vote, and that sends a signal too. You don't like any of the choices. And it's not lost on me that now federal elections and state elections, the proportion of people casting donkey votes have been rising election after election. They're actually quite high levels now. And what this is saying to me, and should be saying to our politicians, is that a lot of citizens aren't happy with either choice, aren't happy with any of the parties running for government. And that's a really powerful message too. And the last and most important heresthetic device is dimension control. This is about changing the way people feel about their choices and tapping into emotions and the pathos identified by Aristotle, which really means emotions. If you can make people angry about their choices, or grieved about their choices, or happy about their choices, emotions are terribly powerful things. And that will get them to make those choices you wish them to make. And talking about the issue of dimension control logically brings about a discussion on rhetoric. Now, rhetoric is the close cousin of heresthetic, and it will always be intertwined. Because you know what, if you're introducing a new dimension, if you're introducing choices, if you're communicating about how you're going to make your choices, you're going to have some rhetoric involved in there. You're going to be using words. You're going to have a person. Now, you'll recall, and there's videos on rhetoric if you like, rhetoric looks at the ethos, the character or portrayed character of the person, the logos, the reasoning for why what the person is saying is correct, and the pathos, the emotions that you wish to instill in the audience. Now, as I've suggested, there's particular overlap between heresthetic and rhetoric in terms of that pathos. Now, I've written a few papers about heresthetic. I wrote a paper on the heresthetic of education policy, and that was published at Policy and Politics, one of the best journals in Europe. And I also wrote a paper about the heresthetic of amalgamation that was published a few years ago at the Australian Journal of Political Science. And in both those papers, I extended the heresthetic literature. Being an economist, I thought to myself, what they haven't really talked about is opportunity cost. So in the heresthetic literature, people will say you just keep poking and prodding the world. You just keep bringing up new dimensions and appealing to emotions and changing the choices on offer until you get what you want. And I said, no, that's not right. There's these things called opportunity costs. What are opportunity costs? Opportunity costs are the cost of the next best thing foregone. The thing you can't do because you're doing the thing that you're doing at present. And what I'm saying is, if you're launching a particular heresthetic attack, a particular dimension, you can't really be launching another one, can you? So there's a cost involved in that. So you can't keep poking and prodding the world until you get what you want. You need to actually stop and put a little bit of thought into which heresthetic device would be best, and which dimension would be best, and what rhetorical seasoning would be best. And when you've thought out all that strategy, then you can launch your heresthetic attack, and because you've minimized your opportunity cost, you will maximize your chances of success. And this is what the Gundagai Council in Exile recently did. A lot of people don't know yet, but they're the first community ever to get the government who forced them into amalgamation to admit their mistake and to allow a de-amalgamation to happen. Now, I've just drafted a paper hot off the press with Professor Yoongi Kim and Emeritus Professor Brian Dullery. We just sent it off to the journal, showing how this was the ideal and an expert use of heresthetic. It is a powerful device. It can allow you to do something that has never been done in the world before, like the Gundagai community was able to do. So when that paper comes out, I'll do a video on that. But in the interim, please think about heresthetic. Grab a copy of the Book of Riker, give it a read, and you'll find that it's something that's very, very powerful. Look, if you found this video helpful, please subscribe and please send the link on to someone else. I'm not getting that much traction with the YouTube video. I do this as a community service in my own time, and I don't mind doing it, but I want to be able to help more people, and I can't do that without your help. So unless each one of you is sending these videos on to other people and encouraging them to watch them and subscribe, we will never get the message out, and we will never improve local government. So please help me to do so. Look, I hope you do give a bit of thought to heresthetic. It is a powerful tool. It's something that all politicians should be aware of, but all people should be aware of, because we are often the victim of heresthetic attacks, and we need to know about it in order to defend ourselves against being manipulated by others. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.